And I think that there's a better way of living, and it's with being honest with one another. Because when we're honest about the things that are paining us, it allows the people in our lives to be more honest about the things paining them.
Hey friends, and welcome back to this season of The Mary Moran Show. If you're just joining us, this is a season we are lovingly referring to as the underestimated season, after the title of my third book, which just released this year, called Underestimated: The Surprisingly Simple Shift to Quit Playing Small, Name the Fear, and Move Forward Anyway. So all this season, which we are now officially extending all the way throughout the rest of 2025, I am being joined by some amazing guests, some all-time favorite past guests and some brand new ones, as we sit down and have the deep, hard conversations you know we love to have around here about all the different faces of fear I cover in the book. Things like procrastination, people-pleasing, imposter syndrome, self-sabotage, second-guessing, perfectionism, and more. And today I couldn't be more excited to be joined by my incredible friend, Jillian Benfield, as we welcome her back to the show to talk about her brand new book, Overwhelmed and Grateful. We'll talk disappointment, resilience, living in awe, and the both and life we need to embrace if we are ever going to stop waiting on perfect before we can even begin. Jillian, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I remember having such a great time the last time that we did this. And so
Yeah,
this is just like a great lunch break.
yeah, that's right. That's right. We're doing this on our lunch break. If y'all are listening on your lunch break, this is the perfect fit for you. I'm going to read just a passage of the book to kick things off, and then we're just going to kind of jump right into it because I was telling you before we hit record, I have a lot of questions for you. And one of my favorite things about you as a writer, as an author, is that there's just such meat to what you write, such depth. And so all of my questions, if you can believe it, are going to center around even just the first two chapters of the book. That is as far as I got before I had to cut myself off because I had 6 dense pages of notes in 2 chapters. So I was like, well, this is not a 14-hour episode. So we're going to go deep on these first two and give people a really good feel and a teaser
Okay,
for just
great.
how much is in this book. So let's start with a little passage. Life can be overwhelming even when it's steady. The book is called Overwhelmed and Grateful. You'll encounter that overwhelm in each of the chapters ahead. Overwhelm looks like anger and confusion. Overwhelm looks like longing and tears, even if we are not in the place of overwhelming busyness or grief, and even when we are not experiencing a life change that has us reeling, there's so often something or someone who needs more of us than we sometimes feel capable of giving. We are pulled in multiple directions at once when life has been turned upside down, and even when it's right side up. When things are steady, there are still schedules to manage, deadlines to meet, and laundry always in need of folding, all while trying to fit in exercising, getting enough sleep, and drinking enough water, too. And so, one of the things I noticed when I was writing Underestimated, so this is the underestimated season, and I think this ties in so perfectly, is that whether it was the bandwidth shifts in chapter 7 on overthinking, I can't create if any of my resources are crunched at all, or the all of my conditions to begin must be perfect before I can even start of the chapter 10, perfectionism is hiding with better PR. One of the biggest reasons people keep playing small is because they have this lie in their head, this lie from fear that says, until life is perfect, you can't even begin. So just kind of like kick us off with that passage being such a great example of that, of do you see that in your readers? Was that part of the heart of the book? Does that resonate what I was just saying, like this idea that everything has to be perfect before we can even leave the starting line?
I think if I had one takeaway that I would want people to walk away from this book with, it would be that we're never at a point of arrival. I
Mm,
think that it's so tempting to think that if we just get to this next part, if we make this business deal, if our kids
yeah.
finally go over this, they accomplish this milestone, then we can start to enjoy life. Then we can practice gratitude. And what I'm saying in this book, as somebody who has even very recently gotten to one of those pieces of life where my husband and I bought our forever house, right? That's something all
Mm,
couples dream up about. And like we did it, right? And this has been a very hard couple of months since we've moved in, nothing to do with moving. We've just had life play out alongside it. life is still life all the
Yeah.
time. And it comes with, right now, our struggle is with we have a son with Down syndrome and behavior, and arguing with the school over behavior therapy. And our daughter is in a main stage play, and we're picking her up at 11 o'clock at night every night. And so we're just, burning fumes at what is the
Right.
saying, like at all ends. And so my point in saying that is what you're saying, that like the time is now, right? Because there's always stuff going on. And I'm saying that too, just in a little bit different way, is like there's joy to be had here, right alongside the hard things that always play out in life, because they will. Right, when
Yeah.
even like releasing my first book, I remember dropping my kids off at school that morning and picking them up like it was a normal day, that release day.
Right.
Right, like life just continues to be life. And so the way we move forward in that, in my opinion, is that we practice honesty and we practice gratitude. It's admitting those hard things and keeping our eyes open for the beautiful things playing out right alongside them.
Yeah, love that so much. One of the things that I noticed right off the bat when I opened up the book is that so the book is overwhelmed, ampersand, grateful, and then chapter by chapter you go through a bunch of different states of being: stressed, longing, busy, scared, grieving. 12 of them in total, all with an ampersand and grateful. And so
Mhm.
just let's talk about. I think a lot of this episode is going to be about embracing this both and life. Why was the grateful the constant? So, in other words, why was it not two pairings of different things each time? It's really interesting that the grateful carries all the way through. So, stressed and grateful, longing and grateful, and so on.
Because I think it's the way that we make it through, right? Like, I discovered this concept of and when I was going through an incredibly difficult time where my youngest son in utero was diagnosed with something called posterior urethral valves, which is very serious. It can be deadly. He was also diagnosed with club feet, and I had a child with a disability. So it was such a difficult time where we were seeing 18 specialists at a time. And I read this article by this woman who said that she had lost a baby, and her
Mm,
therapist asked her how she was doing with the birth of her nephew. And she said, I'm really happy he's healthy, but I'm still really sad about my loss. And the therapist corrected her and said, and you're really
yeah,
sad about your
yeah.
loss. You don't have to choose. And so
Mm,
it was that I just started crying when I read it, because I have my infant in my arms with casts on his legs. My son with Down syndrome is watching Sesame Street after we have been to multiple appointments that day. And I realized, like, I was so grateful because my infant son could have been so much worse off. I mean, the doctors predicted such dire things for him, and those didn't come to pass. And yet,
yeah,
it was still so difficult. And I could
right.
be so grateful that the worst didn't come to pass, and also admit that this is the hardest my life has ever been. And that just changed so much for me, to realize that I could hold both of those things at once. I could be real and genuine with people, and I could still look for the beauty in my life.
This kind of leads me into a conversation about noticing and sort of what we begin to see and sort of the good that's all around us. So, tell us the Pikes Peak story.
Probably one of the things that I've written that has resonated the most with my online community has been this story where I talk about one of the saddest conversations I've ever had in my life. And
Yeah.
that happened after my husband's grandfather's funeral. And the conversation wasn't about grief, it wasn't about death. It was about beauty. And I was sitting across from this very old lady, and she was talking about where her sister lived in Montana, and how cold and how harsh the winters were there. And I asked her, do the mountains, I know she lives in this like gorgeous piece of Montana, do the mountains and the lakes, help her get through that? And she was like, oh, it all just becomes the background. And I
Mm,
remember that being really sad to me at the time, because I'm from the East Coast, and my husband and I had just been living out in the West in the mountains for a couple of years during these hard periods of our lives. And they got me through. It was just noticing this beauty all around me. It was this reminder of God's presence. It was just a constant for me, and I couldn't imagine them becoming the background. And
Yeah.
then fast forward to a couple of years later, I'm driving my youngest to preschool, and I think one of the prettiest spots in Colorado Springs was at the top of this one hill where his preschool was, and you get the panoramic view of the mountain range there. And every day I would just kind of like gasp, like, there it is.
Mm,
And this day it didn't. And I
mm.
realized that just something was off, and I needed to figure that out and get to a place where I could start noticing again, because it makes such a difference.
Yeah, because we're actually wired for survival to notice the negative, to notice the hard and the bad and the danger and the threat. And our brains need to clear up space so that anything that's just like pattern recognition and this the good, it's the constant good, it's going to ignore that. And that is, I think, one of the great heartbreaks of life. And you say, I want to read a couple of passages. You say, because when we are overwhelmed, we can get used to coasting. We can get used to living with grief and letting it be our only companion and not make room for anyone else to come in. We can get used to wanting to go back to better times and forget to live the lives we have right now. We can get so used to the mountain view that instead of our appreciating its majesty, it becomes merely the background of our lives, which, like, side note, there's a running mountain metaphor throughout Underestimated. So this is so perfect. You go on, because I do not want to become an old woman who let the beauty of her life become the background. I have a feeling you don't want to become an old woman who missed the good and lovely things of your one precious life either. And I just wrote oof in all caps and red in my notes, like oof.
Yeah, because it's so easy, right? Like, it's so easy to get bogged down in our to-do list and our goals, and just also like the mundanity of life too. Like, it can be easy to forget to be delighted
Yeah.
by the life that is playing out alongside us. And
Yeah.
I think the act of noticing, the act of practicing what it's like to be easily delighted, um, is a way for us we're always going to have these hard things, and we need to notice that there's so many good things playing out right
Mm.
alongside them.
Yeah, love that. And kind of building right off of that conversation, one of the things you're very clear to say, and make clear in the book, is that this is not some version of toxic positivity. This is not just like, oh, you should just be grateful. You say, but what does the spiritual practice of recognizing and being thankful for beauty look like when life is really hard? What does it look like when you are covered in baby spit up and taking a conference call in your unkempt house? I wish you could see the rest of the podcast room right now.
I have a
We've
pile
got
of toys
this
behind me right here.
space. We have a little square of clean. That's it. I love it. What does it look like when the unexpected has upended your life? Instead of walking your neighborhood each morning, you are now walking the hospital hallways, praying for a rescue. Western culture often tells us we should downplay the hard parts of our lives and just focus on the positive. Yet forced positivity can be dangerous. Toxic positivity is defined as the act of rejecting or denying stress, negativity, or other negative experiences that exist, and multiple studies have found that denying our emotions make us depressed and physically ill. And you actually reference a Harvard study about people bottling up their emotions, talking about it increases premature death from all causes by 30%, and specifically from a cancer that is increased by 70%. And I just found that, like, that is so fascinating to me. This concept of unprocessed or bottled up or denied or shoved down emotions actually turning into a physical thing. So maybe just spend a little time talking about, like, what that was like when you found that study, or other studies that maybe you stumbled across, like the actual science behind what happens when we go in the opposite direction of gratitude.
Yeah, yeah. Let me give you a little snapshot of a story that happened to me with toxic positivity. And I was at church with my youngest, and this was at the time where he was still very sickly and he had casts on both of his legs.
Mm.
And this man walked up to me after church and asked me about the cast. And I told him that they were correcting his club feet, and then I went on. I was like, he's got this nephrostomy tube too. It's draining excess fluid out of his kidney. And it's been a really hard couple of months. And he said to me, "Oh, you're blessed. You're blessed. You're blessed." And he walked away.
Hmm.
And I just remember feeling so jarred and so dumb for thinking that this person like actually cared, and he didn't actually care. He just wanted information, and then he
Right?
wanted me to shut up about it. He wanted to say like, no, you're good, you're good, you got God, we're here at church, like, yeah, you're good. And you feel like gaslit. And
Mm,
honestly, I think that we do this to ourselves. I think when we don't admit our hard things, we are almost gaslighting ourselves to believing that it's really not as bad as I think it is. I should stop complaining. I should stop thinking so much on this. And so, um, toxic positivity, I can't stand. And I do not think that this book is about that. It's about like, hey, there are good things playing out alongside bad things that are always going to be present in our lives and in the world, right? Like this is like a time where there's so much tragedy happening. We see these tragic images play out all the time. And the reality is that there's always going to be hard times. And how do we make it through? It's
mm.
admitting those things, admitting how we feel, the grief that we feel, the collective grief that we feel, the frustration, and also keeping our eyes open to what is good, because goodness is always present. And I think that's because God is always present and always working in ways that we cannot see, to bend our stories towards goodness.
This isn't even in my notes, but let's go just a layer deeper here because I was telling you that I was at an author's retreat in Orange Beach, Alabama, just a couple of days ago. And we actually got into a very deep, nighttime in the pool kind of conversation about this. And so I don't expect you to have the answer. Let's just riff on it a little bit and see what comes up. We really got into a deep end conversation in the deep end of the pool about the scripture that talks about whatever's noble, whatever's lovely, whatever is pure, like concentrate on these things.
Mhm.
And then like another scripture that talks about like the tongue has the power to speak life and death. And so like how do we balance things like scriptures like that taken at their face value could sound a lot like, oh, toxic positivity, like only say the good things, only think
Mhm.
about the good
Mhm.
things, with the depth of, you will have trouble in this world. Take heart. I've overcome the world. So they seem to almost contradict, but I do think maybe it's this goodness you were just talking about that reconciles.
Yeah, I think it's, Jesus quoted the Psalms more than any other book of the Hebrew literature back then. And the Psalms are more than half of them are laments, and Paul also is very open about his struggles as well. He tells us to focus on what's noble and what's lovely, and also talks about this thorn in his flesh, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that we are supposed to think about what's good and what's lovely. We're supposed to notice these things. We're supposed to notice kindness between people and not get lost to the darkness of the world. And yet, darkness of this
Mm,
world exists. It
yeah.
exists out there, and it exists in our own lives. And that's basically why I wrote this book: is how do we hold together um, the light that Jesus is and the light that He promises, while also being aware of the darkness. If we downplay the darkness in our own lives, not only is it going to harm us physically and mentally, like that study suggests, it also will take our ability away to empathize with others, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
we have to be aware of the darkness in our own lives, in others' lives, so that we can be alive to it all. That's what this is
Mm,
about. It's about being alive to it all. Yes, the
yeah.
darkness is here. Let's play a part in healing that. And how do we play a part in healing that? We don't lose sight that the light is here and the light
Yeah.
never fades.
Wow. I love that so much. And that made me think of something I actually learned on this retreat, which doesn't directly have to do with our conversation here, but I just think you're going to love it. And I think our listeners are going to love it. Shout out to Liz Kobo, who put on the retreat, and she is starting something called the Graceful Apologist. And she was sharing with us, I want to do like a huge deep dive on this because I find it so fascinating that in Jesus's time, one of the sort of shortcuts or shorthands when they were referencing the Psalms is that they would say the first line of that psalm, and that everybody listening would know that it meant go read that whole psalm or go, the meaning is like, go reference this whole psalm. And so when Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? It's actually referencing back to a psalm that if you like watch it play out, it's saying what you're saying. Like there's darkness, but the light has come to overtake the darkness. And like that just blew my mind that
Yeah.
like we see it and we only understand the words on the page and there's like this context there that's really
Yeah, I love
fascinating.
that. My
Yeah.
favorite psalm is Psalm 13, by the way, which starts off with, how long, Lord? Will you forget me
Yeah.
forever? And it
That was me on
ends.
Tuesday.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah.
And yet it ends in, I will trust in your unfailing love, for you have been good to me, right? We can say these things, God can hold it all. We're allowed to lament, and we also can remember that God's goodness does not run out.
Let's talk about some of the flip side of this, of the same science, same research. I mean, obviously different research studies, but science on flip sides of the coin, that gratitude and consistently practicing gratitude is actually really healthy for you. It's really good for you. I'm going to just read a little bit of it and I want to dig into some that I had a question for you about. It says, according to researchers at Harvard Medical School, in the process of practicing gratitude, people usually recognize that the source of the goodness in their lives lies at least partially outside of themselves. And consequently, being grateful also helps us to connect to something larger than ourselves. The Greater Good Science Center at the University of California, Berkeley describes gratitude as the quote, social glue that inspires people to be more generous, kind, and helpful, and is key to building and nurturing strong relationships. And so, what I wrote in my notes is that I find this so interesting because I've been having all of these conversations lately, or I'm seeing conversations on threads and on social media talking about how people have like sort of left their bodies. They've sort of checked out of like the social contract or like basic common courtesy or consideration to others. One of the things we've noticed here where we live is there's a little seawall out in front of our house and people have stopped moving over to make room when you're going to pass them. Like when you're
Mm,
coming one direction and they're coming the other. They keep taking up the space and you have to kind of walk into the grass to get around them. And so that what I wrote in my notes is that's so interesting of like coming out of a couple of really dark years with COVID and, fill in the blank, whatever else, where it didn't feel like there was much reason to be grateful. Like, are we seeing, is that one of many reasons, besides isolation and whatever else, that we're seeing people sort of, um, the social glue is sort of disintegrating, as it were?
yeah,
Big
I
question.
mean, maybe, and maybe it's partially because, uh, I don't think in my lifetime I've witnessed a news cycle quite like the one that we're in, right? And
Right.
so, and going back to 2025 through now, I mean, for 5 years we have been in this endless, harsh news cycle, and it is hard to practice gratitude when it feels like the world is burning. And for some people, it literally is burning. And how do you keep moving forward with that? How do you go to the grocery store? And how do you, enjoy a date night when you see so many people suffering?
Yeah, so the thing that's coming up for me that's really important for me to clarify for everybody listening is I'm not saying, "Hey guys, if we're just all more grateful for like what we have, then like none of all this is going to be fine." I want to be really clear about that. And I'm definitely not saying it's the only reason, but it is a contributing part of like the facet of reasons, that I hadn't been thinking about that much. And so I think this is like a really good opportunity for us to talk about like gratitude is not fluffy, right? Gratitude is not like that knee-jerk reaction that even made me feel the need to clarify of like, I don't want just a tiny clip of this to be somewhere and people going, okay, she's saying like, if we're just grateful, then the forest will stop burning or whatever. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I mean, this is the tension of like starting even when life is not perfect, being grateful even when life is not perfect. And like
Right.
gratitude is an act of almost rebellion or at the very least resilience.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify that. Did anything come up for you when I was saying that?
Yeah, no, I think that as somebody who has, been through a lot of grief in my life, it was hard. I was nervous about writing this book because I was worried that it would come off as if, well, let's all be grateful. Let's just be grateful. And that's not it. I think that and is the way forward because it's honest gratitude. It is counting the losses and naming those and lamenting those. And it is hopeful because it refuses to let go of the light, the gifts that are still present. And I think that's how we move forward in life in this particular time that you just mentioned, where people are kind of, everybody's bogged down right now, right? I think this is how
Yeah.
we move forward. It's by holding these things together.
Yeah, and that actually sets up perfectly without us even meaning to, which I love when that happens. My next question is about this paradox that you identify in the book. You say gratitude requires a heightened awareness. This noticing can sustain us and it has the power to change us. Gratitude is required to transform us into the people we are meant to become. But there's a paradox here. Denying our emotions harms us. Practicing gratitude, a habit that requires us to look at the good and positive aspects of life, helps us. So, how do we deal with these two seemingly competing truths? And I feel like this is what you've been saying all along, this sort of idea of like it allows the gratitude to be honest. Do you want to just maybe talk a little bit about what that looks like for you between like you and God? When like how honest are you getting with God? These days. Yeah.
Very honest, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think probably even more so in my life was, and the book goes through, it takes you through 3 cycles of life. You're either in order, a period of order, which I am right now, disorder, which was I was in years ago when I talked about where my infant son was, or reorder when the storm has passed and yet the path you're on, it blew you to a different path, and it doesn't mean everything's perfect, but you're trying to find your way forward on this new path and you're reacquainted with God. That's the period of reorder. So in a period of disorder, I think I probably was at my most honest with God, if I'm being honest with you. In this period of order, it looks like for me, every morning before I open my laptop, I take a deep breath with my cup of coffee and I pray through the things that are frustrating me, the things that are disappointing me, the things that are worrying me. And then I pray my and that is to look for where I am seeing so much joy, or where I am like, we just moved to this house and we have a river in our backyard. And sometimes that prayer is, God, thank you so much for this beautiful view today, and just soaking that in before I move on with my day. It looks like when I am just burnt out from driving my kids all around town, to take a deep breath and be like, I am very tired, and this is tiring and daunting, and it's monotonous. And I can notice how the sun sparkles off the water as I drive past, over a causeway. I can hold these things together. So that's in this place of order. That's what and looks like for me right now, is just really practicing noticing it. And when I'm really at my healthiest, I pray that and throughout the day.
Yeah, I love that. I one of the things that surprised me reading in the book is just how old the ampersand is, how old and is.
Mhm.
The et sort of being combined. That it's even been discovered in the ash of the volcanic eruption from Pompeii, 79 AD. You mentioned this before, but I actually really want to read this and let this like hang in the air over people's heads for a second. You say, however, unlike the word and that connects two ideas, the word but often does the opposite. But disconnects a statement that has already been made. When we use but, we negate the first part of our truth, or at the very least, downplay it. And then you go on in shortly later chapter and say, and is a spiritual practice of noticing, and is a prayer. And I just wrote down how good that was. And I love that so much.
Thank
But
you.
I think that's so passionate about like, so passionate. I'm passionate about how fascinating that is. That this idea of like how much our words can have power in how we're thinking about it. Like, oh yeah, like we have a nice house, but all these things are going wrong with it or whatever. Oh yeah, I'm glad to be married, but oh yeah, I'm glad to be a mom, but
Mhm.
whatever it is, fill in the blank. Just this small difference, I think it's a posture of the heart. And so I don't know, just like maybe like anything that you're feeling on the and versus but, and like any ways you're reminding yourself to be an and versus but person.
Yeah, I think that I used to be a butt person.
Yeah.
Being an Enneagram 3, like we spin things, right? So that they seem
Mm,
shinier.
yeah.
And so I think that I would say something like, my son's medical conditions are really hard and I'm really tired, but I'm so thankful that they're not as bad as they could be, you
Yeah.
know?
So you're doing the opposite. You're
Yeah,
doing the
I would
opposite,
do
which
the
is the hard thing
opposite.
first.
I would
But
try to
okay.
make it shiny, And
Wow.
I think that's honestly what we're trained to do by society. We're
That's right.
supposed to downplay the hard things because people don't want to hear it. Like, then you're just a complainer, right? And I think that there's a better way of living, and it's with being honest with one another. Because when we're honest about the things that are paining us, it allows the people in our lives to be more honest about the things paining them. And
Wow.
yeah,
Wow, that's good.
and when we are able to hold that hard thing and that beautiful thing together, it gives people a lens to see that that's possible for them too. We don't have to choose. We don't have to pick to only focus on the hard things in our lives, and we don't have to pick to only focus on the positive things in our lives. They are always going to play out alongside each other in life, because that's how life goes, and it's okay and better to be honest about both of them.
Yeah, gosh, I love that so much. You mentioned the three orientations little bit earlier, and I want to kind of camp there. I have a good number of questions about it, so I'm going to just read a little bit to set it up even more. In his book, The Spirituality of the Psalms, Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann will
Mm-hmm.
say
Mm-hmm.
that sounds good,
Mm-hmm.
divides the Psalms into three categories: orientation, disorientation, new orientation, or what you call order, disorder, reorder. Orientation, when life is relatively steady, even a bit predictable, and we can live at a day to day pace. Of course, even when our feet find a solid path, there is inevitably a bump along the way that makes us trip. No pathway exists without an ill placed stone or a twisty root that can make us lose our balance. Or perhaps you're walking with a heavier backpack than most. You carry this added challenge or pain with you, yet you've learned how to manage. You know how to move through life with it, even if at times it feels like too much. Being in a place of order doesn't mean life is without hardships, but for the most part, these challenges are an expected disruption since we know life is never perfect. And I just wrote, like, this reminds me so much of that mountain metaphor throughout Underestimated, and how the garbage and the junk in our story becomes the heavy boulder we're carrying with us, and how easy it is to get tripped up. There's one part where it talks about failure as a 10-pound bag of marbles sent scattering down the mountain to get you tripped up. One of the things that I talk about in Underestimated is that for people who are kind of in this camp that you're describing, there's another point in the book where you say being in orientation or order is actually a privilege,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because like nothing bad is really happening right
Mm-hmm.
now. You are just in the sort of like day to day is good. And I talk about the good enough, like those who are in the camp of good enough is the enemy of great. And the sort of pleasant, familiar that they're used to becomes kind of a prison they can't break out of because they're so afraid of disrupting the status quo. So you say most of us will spend our lives in ordered or orientation. And I'm wondering if that is just because of the rhythms of God and the Psalms, because the three orientations are sort of the pattern of the Psalms, that it's addressing one of those three. Is that just the regular rhythm of life, or is that an intentional choice of us to try to stay in order even when we're being called out?
That's so good. Mary, I do think when you're talking about being called out, like going after something, right? I think even is to probably follow that call. You're probably in a place of order to hear that. But here's what I'll say about that. I actually, you haven't gotten to this part in the book, but the last chapter of the ordered section is called Scared and Grateful. And it's
Mm,
how we can live scared when we are in a place of order, because things are so comfortable that we forget to start to live. We forget to go for the thing that could disrupt our comfort level. We can also, if you're somebody like me who has been through periods of grief, you can start living as if the other shoe could drop at any moment, right?
yeah,
And
that's right.
not get too invested, right? Because if I don't
Mm,
invest too much, then I can't fall too far.
right.
Um,
Ooh, that's good.
and yeah, and so I think that the majority of us do spend most of our lives in order just because we're not in turmoil most of the time. Now, I'm talking to people, who are probably Westerners and are not living in, a time of war, and that, I just want to be clear about that. But I do think it's probably just more of the rhythm of how life goes, that you just kind of get into a steady pace. But when we are in a steady pace, we can live scared. We
Yeah.
can hoard, protect, not give too much, not go too far, because we're too afraid of disrupting the comfort that we have.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like, ooh, I could keep going deeper here, but I have so many questions I want to make sure I get to. So I think I feel good about that. We're going
Okay.
to move a little bit on to the both. I wrote in my notes the both and life of Jesus. Um, you talk about like we can really run into the habit of thinking all the other people around us are basically in a state of order at all times. That everything is just pleasant day to day, and they're not having any kind of phases of reorder or disorder. And just to be clear for everybody listening who hasn't gotten to read the book, reorder is this moment where you've been in disorder and it feels like it's never going to end and there's never going to be any relief. And then in God's timing, he does move. And you start to become kind of like this new thing in the wilderness, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
you're not necessarily going back to where
Mm-hmm.
you've been.
You shouldn't.
Um, yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We're not
I
supposed to go
love that you
back.
said that.
Yeah, we're
I
not
love that you
supposed. You're
said that.
never going to get your old life back. That life is
Wow.
gone when disorder comes. There will be parts of it that remain, but it should
Wow.
look different. And if it doesn't look different, then we're doing it wrong. And I think a lot of us can get caught in trying to look backwards, when I get back to that, that's when life will be good again. But God does new things. God creates new things out of the wreckage. So sorry to riff on that, but
Do not be sorry because I'm just going to sit here for a second and I'm going to let that hang in the air because that was for somebody. That was for somebody for sure. You're not meant to go back. That disorder that comes in is meant to bring us to a new place.
yeah.
That's good. That's good. So this idea that everybody else is just hanging out in order and nothing bad is ever happening to them is an illusion, first of all, but also we don't want to stay there, second of all. And I wrote down, even Jesus had a both and life. And I want to read this really beautiful passage from you. You say, Jesus entered the darkness with us, acknowledged its power, wept with us, was hungry and tired and misunderstood like us. Jesus enjoyed friendships and ended up being betrayed by a friend. Jesus experienced the joy of healing people wherever he went, and he experienced exhaustion. Jesus knew the deep trust of a friend that prompted him to walk on water, and the same friend denied knowing Jesus in his darkest hour. Jesus knew the darkness, and he was the light. He wants us to remember darkness is here, and so too is the light. This light is more powerful than the darkness. This light is in us and all around us. This light is pointing out the good and pointing us toward a good life. In this world, we will experience the full range of what it means to be human, and being human is so very hard. And we always have access to the light. And so sometimes on this show, we have what I call sort of a very meta, break the fourth wall, Zach Morris TV timeout kind of a moment with our massive cell phones, where we just have a moment to appreciate really beautiful writing.
Oh,
A lot of
yeah.
people who listen to the show want to be writers and authors themselves. And I just think that is just really stunning writing. And you just really feel that tension and that flip of the switch each time of like, oh, right. Even, if Jesus can walk through life criticized, why do I expect to not be criticized?
Yeah.
Like that kind of a feel. So that's just really all that is. It's just a,
Thank
a
you.
moment of appreciation, slow
Well,
clap
thank
style
you
for good
so
writing.
much. One thing I would like to add to that is like, that's why I don't understand why in Christian circles we're so obsessed with positivity. Like,
Right?
so much of Jesus's life was not positive. It's
Mm,
he is the light and he is goodness and all that is good. And he experienced so much heartbreak while here on earth. And that's why I don't understand why that's been missed in Christian culture. But I am hoping that this message of accepting both, of embracing both, admitting the hard, like Jesus did, and also keeping our eyes open to the light that he offers, is what I'm hoping that passage will bring out in people.
yeah. Do you know what your wing is? Are you a strong for wing?
I test as a two, but I go back and forth. I go back and forth. I think a lot of writers probably do flirt with that four wing. Probably. I mean, I know it has to be connected to I don't know. It's very possible.
Yeah, that's a very four. I for a long time thought I was a three. We've talked about it a lot on the show. Sorry for the long time listeners. I've recently found out, like in the last couple of years, that I am what's called a self-preserving four who achieves for safety. But the fourth is actually like they're all masks, but it feels like the more authentic mask below the three. And so that's a very four thing to say. It's like why as Christians are we so obsessed with positive? Like, look at all the heartbreak. Yeah.
And maybe
I
it's
love it.
because, maybe it is I have a four wing, or maybe it's because for 5 years I lived in such a dark place and felt
Yeah.
so alone in it when it came to Christian circles, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And I hope
Come sit
that,
with me anytime you want.
yeah, yeah, and how relieved I was to find to find people like you who you can
Yeah.
actually bring your full self to, right? And
That's right.
so I hope to see some more positive movement in that direction.
Yeah, I love it. Positive movement and not always being positive.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right.
I love it. I love it. Well, speaking, you set that up really beautifully. That my next category of notes here says the both and of her life, meaning your life. 2023, the first part of the year was you releasing your first book, Throw All the Confetti, your husband becoming a partner and is finally becoming a partner in his orthodontic practice, Throw All the Confetti. It was the year of all your dreams finally coming true, but then the second half of 2023 hits. And I want you to tell that whole story, but I just want to set that up with like everybody I know right now is having these like whiplash moments of like first half of the year versus second half of the year or sometime in the same day.
Yeah.
It's like the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows are definitely cohabitating lately. And so I feel like everybody listening has probably got their own version of like, yes, what in the world? Everything finally starts working and then the bottom falls out or what have you. So set us up the second half of
Yeah.
2023.
So in that half, we were really going through some struggles with our daughter. And our daughter is just this amazing kid. She's so adaptable because she was a military kid, probably because she has a brother with a disability, and she's just always had to roll with it. And she's just a naturally happy person, and so kind, just has the kindest heart. And she just started experiencing this really deep anxiety over school. And looking back at it now, I have my theories, and I actually talked to her about it recently. And I think it was like a mean girl situation where she just couldn't understand why people would want to be mean. Like that just did
Mm,
not compute with her brain because she's just so sweet.
yeah,
And I think it just rocked her world. I think we all have those moments as children where you realize like adults aren't always right. And it's
right.
just like one of those moments that changes you. I think this was one of her moments, but it really sent her on us. Like we were crying every day before school, and it was just very sad and very confusing for all of us. And my husband and I had a trip scheduled to go back to the mountains because it had been years since we had been back to the mountains because we had moved to Florida. And we almost didn't go. And my mom told us that nothing would change if we didn't go. And
Yeah.
so we went. And then 2 days after we arrived, I was able to get my mom when the kids weren't around and got the full story and realized it had just gotten worse when we were away. And it was just such a punch in the gut, just not knowing what to do. And we were on our way to Yellowstone National Park in a car, and we just realized like we had a choice in front of us. Like I made a call to a child psychologist that day. Like I did what I could do in that day. And we could let this sinking feeling stay with us, or we
Mm,
could move forward with it.
yeah.
Like we could let it drown out the day and drown out the beauty and the reason why we came to come see like this amazing sight. Or we could live with it in the end, essentially. And so it ended up being this really hard and also really beautiful day where my husband and I were able to like connect on this very deep level because we had such this hard thing playing out and this beauty like right in front of us, all around us.
Right.
And so yeah, it kind of goes back to that first thing that we talked about. What I said, I hope people take away from this book is that you're really never at a point of arrival, right?
Yeah.
Like it was the year our dreams came true. And then the second half of that year was so dark and scary for a couple of months. And things got better, and that's how life goes, right? But we're never at a point of arrival, and I think the only way we can move forward is really in living in the end.
That actually sets me up so perfectly for the next question too, because you're here in this place of Yellowstone where it's like if Yellowstone doesn't inspire awe in you, you
Yeah,
know,
what
and
will?
right, where there's something wrong, right? It reminds me there the all the national parks did these really funny posters as a marketing campaign of their worst 1-star reviews
Yes, yes, I remember
online, and it
this.
was like, "The Wi-Fi is terrible." It's like, "Something's broken. You've lost the
Right,
plot.
right,
Go back."
yes.
Okay, so you're in this place, and it's inspiring all of this awe with this sort of, like, tension and this whiplash of, like, also all of this lament, awe and lament happening at the same time, and you wrote in the book something I thought was so fascinating, and I would just love to hear you riff on it. Awe is not the same as joy. And I'll even set you up with this New York Times article featuring a researcher named Keltner who says our bodies respond differently when we are experiencing awe. We make different sound, show a different facial expression. The vastness of the awe-filled experience makes us feel small and fills us with wonder. So unpack that for a little bit. What is the difference, especially from like a Christian standpoint, you think between awe and joy?
I think the key component with awe is that it comes by way of mystery. It comes by
Mm,
surprise. I
mm,
don't think it's probably possible, maybe it is, to experience awe every single day. Um, I think it's something that we can cultivate by noticing, by being people who notice things. But awe, by definition, comes to us by way of mystery. And I think it's that feeling, like, that feeling that you have when you stand next to the ocean where you feel so small and the ocean is so big, and how you
mm,
just one person in this grand universe, and somehow you're called so important and worthy and loved and all these things. Like, that is, for me, that's the feeling of awe, when you just feel like so connected to God and the universe and to all of it, to your life, really. That's awe. I think joy is something we can experience every day. And I think that is by the way of noticing and gratitude. But yeah,
mm.
awe is that kind of special thing that happens, that comes to
Nice.
us by way of mystery. And the way that I talk about this in the book, I don't know if you're heading down this road, but I think the thing that has helped me to experience awe the most is by having an incarnational worldview where I
Mhm.
believe God is in everything. So God is in the river behind my house, and God is in the palm trees on the way to get the kids to school. That helps me to um, appreciate life more and God's beauty, because it is always present.
There was something in my head that was playing around with I don't even know how I feel about it, so we'll say it out loud and then we'll find out. Awe is the act of feeling so small, joy is the act of feeling so big. Like
Oh,
or that you like, it's knowing how much you matter,
oh
to God
man.
that, like, no matter
Yeah.
what's going on. Maybe there's something there.
There
I don't
might be
know. It
something
literally just
there.
came
There
up.
totally could be. There
It might be
totally could
nothing.
be.
We'll
There
find out.
totally
We'll
could
keep
be.
going. We'll find
Yeah.
out. I
Yeah.
love it. Okay, so talk just a little bit. Let's get into kind of some of the science of gratitude, the science of awe. Sorry, and we're going to camp out in awe for a second. Feeling awe has numerous benefits, including calming inflammation, reducing pain perception, and calming down our brain stress center. It stimulates the release of oxytocin, the love hormone that promotes bonding. Psychologically, it does some things in terms of like the inner critic's voice, and then also helps us with stress. So you have presumably been practicing awe as you're writing the book, right? We write the book we need.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
like what have you like just talk a little bit about like the actual practical benefits you've seen of it?
I think that ex- intentionally, at least trying to experience awe, um, gives me perspective. I think that when, like, let's say it's a really hard week, I know that at the end of that week I am going to be walking the beach with my husband, and in the quiet and in the love we have for each other and wrapped in love and all these things. And I think that it just like gives you this otherworldly worldview,
Mm,
like this thing that you're, yes, the week is hard and there's these details of our lives that are hard, and we're a part of something so much bigger. That's what awe makes me feel like, when you're standing at the foot of a mountain and just see like you're a part of this, like you're a part of God's plan, and you're a part of this world we all get to experience with each other. And I think that it helps keep my hard things in perspective and my good things in perspective too.
yeah. Love that. Building on Keltner's studies about awe, he actually identified 8 types of awe available to all of us by studying 26 countries. They include music, moral beauty, noticing kindness between people, birth and death, visual design, spirituality, and yes, nature, and also one that he calls collective effervescence. This feeling that comes when we experience beautiful things in group settings when we are moving as one. And I cannot let that go by without bringing up a really silly example of this that's probably going to make some people roll their eyes. That's fine. Stay with me. Stay with me. Have you heard about the collective amnesia people have been having at Taylor Swift
Yes.
concerts?
Yes, I have heard of
Right?
this. Yes.
Right? There's just
Yeah.
this like collective euphoria and you kind of like
Yes.
almost like leave your body or what have you.
Yeah.
I have nothing really more to say about that than that it just
Well, you know
reminded
what?
me
I'm
of
glad you
that.
brought up the collective effervescence one because I think that the idea of cultivating awe can be kind of like, what if you don't live in like a particularly beautiful place? Or I think that like you can book the ticket to the football game, to the team that you like. Like I think the other night you've brought it up a couple of times of this retreat and these deep conversations you were having with other people. Maybe that was collective effervescence, right? Like you're just
Totally.
like in sync with each other,
Mm,
experiencing this thing that all made you feel so connected to one another. That's beautiful. And that makes us feel more alive. And like, look, you've come back refreshed and renewed from that experience. So I think that awe it can be a little hard to like figure out like, how do I cultivate awe? And for me, it's like being somebody who is easily delighted. Like
mm,
being delighted by the sunset that particular morning has this like really girly shade of pink in the sky and just like
yeah.
sitting with that for a moment. And also
Mm,
I think collective effervescence is like a great way to like intentionally go do that. Go to the musical with people and
right.
go clap in your seat with others. And I think that's a beautiful way to be a part and be in the world.
Yeah, I love that. And it goes back to something you were saying earlier about like we have never experienced a news cycle like the one we're
Mhm.
experiencing. And it used to be people would sit in front of their TVs and watch people watch, us land on the moon, and now it's like it just feels like anything that's filling the collective awareness is just negative, negative, negative.
Yeah.
There's even like I'm thinking of the oh boy, the what is the name of that company? Astronomer CEO, right?
Yeah.
Like we all sort of
Yes.
collectively knew about that, but it was not really it was a really negative thing
Yeah.
we all sort of knew about. So like Taylor Swift's engagement would be
Yeah.
like the late it's basically Taylor Swift is providing collective
I was about
effervescence.
to say I think it's why she's I mean obviously she's always been a mega star, but I think it's why her star is so bright right now because
Yeah.
it's something everybody can rally around in this like kind
Yeah.
of these dire times that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's kind of dig in. You mentioned this about there was a word that was really fancy about God is in everything. What is that called?
Incarnational worldview.
In incarnational
Incarnational
worldview.
worldview, sorry.
Okay, you say we feel awe when we are fully present in worldly beauty, and awe is otherworldly. So this is also a both and.
Mhm.
Awe is here and it's transcendent. I believe that is because God is here and transcendent. I believe experiencing awe is to experience the divine. Awe helps us to connect to God, who is both universal and personal. When we recognize God in all things, experience how big this universe is, and realize how God still cares about us, we feel awestruck. When we live our life in such a way, when we practice noticing God in all things, it leaves us in awe. And then this is the next part. I just, in my notes, I just wish my guests could see my notes because this is just your work I'm talking about. It just says fascinating. Talk more about this
Thank you.
in bold and red. In the effort to contain ourselves, to contain our behavior, we also tried to contain the one who created us. We called God's creation outside of mankind lesser, less worthy, less important. Some even demonized it at times, warning that seeing God within its beauty would be replacing God, would be worshiping the wrong thing. As author Brian McLaren puts it, there is a bias against the earth because the gospel is presented as an evacuation plan. Woo! That is, we could just talk for 17 days straight about that, but
Mhm.
tell me thoughts on that because I just want to hear you riff on it.
So that piece of writing probably came from deep within my past as a child of being brought up in like a fundamentalist Baptist school that I went to, where I remember being warned so much to not worship land. Like, it was just like this strange thing. And maybe that piece of writing won't connect with everybody because you've never heard like the earth being demonized before. But for me, like having this shift that I had with like realizing God is in everything, that everything that we see is an outpouring of God's self, that just changed so much for me. It gave me permission that I didn't even know that I needed, and allows me to see beauty more easily when I see God in God's creation.
Yeah, it's another both and, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
you can be someone who really wants to emphasize humans were made in the image of God, and therefore we're
Mm-hmm.
sort of like the pinnacle of the 6 days,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like what it was all building to, and his fingerprints are on everything,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yes.
those two don't have to be in tension, even if they,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I
yeah,
think God is in everything and above everything, and in everything includes also in all of us, which I
yeah.
hope helps me. And I'm not perfect at it. And I blew up at somebody the other day, if I'm being totally honest, and I shouldn't have. But I hope it helps me to be a kinder, more empathetic, patient person, to
Yeah.
see God in all people too.
Yeah, love it, love it. Well, so this kind of sets us up into the last big chunk of questions to ask you about, and this is this idea of longing, which is the second chapter. That's how far we've gotten. We're in the second chapter now. An
I love
hour
that you're
in.
taking your time with it, though. I had another podcaster tell me, she's like, I couldn't put it down, so I couldn't stop reading.
Yeah.
I'm like, how did you read this so quickly? So
Right.
I think both are good. I think and if you do read it quickly, then you maybe can
Read
take
it
notes
again.
like Mary.
Yeah. Right. Read it again. You're going too fast. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's just unpack some things I had under the notes of longing. One of the things I think is just interesting as a side note, you mentioned really in passing, we were in a space between disorder and reorder. So we've talked a lot about order and orientation. And then disorder comes and shakes it up, and we move into a new way in the wilderness. But in that stage where disorder becomes sort of your new normal, that can start to feel like order,
Yeah.
right? That I thought that was really fascinating. So I'll
Hmm.
just put that out there to hang in the air for somebody. You might think you're in order, but maybe you're just in a prolonged disorder, and
Maybe.
reorder is still coming.
Hmm.
When life hums along, when days become laced with sameness, it's a privilege. I mentioned this earlier. When we get to a place where life doesn't have too many stressors, acknowledging here once more that there will always be a few, it is a gift. When we are privileged to live in ordered times, we have more time to wonder, more space to dream, and we can begin to long. We long for something different or perhaps something more. I asked my longtime pastor and mentor, Dan, what do people struggle with when life is relatively good? This has given me head to toe chills. Whew. I was surprised by how quickly he answered me. Temptation. We can be tempted by many things when life is good, including being tempted into thinking we are the sole reason our life is as good as it is. Woof is my notes. Woof. That's WHOOF for everybody checking at home. So, just talk a little bit, maybe just to kind of transition us into talking about some of the science of it, before we even get there. Just tell me if you remember it, the story of Billy Bob Harrell Jr., who's talked about the worst thing that ever happened to him, and it was
Yeah.
kind of a surprising answer.
Yeah. The worst thing that ever happened to him was winning the lottery. And I'll tell you, I have some family members, like every time we get around each other, they talk about like what they would do if they would win the lottery. And it like
Same,
drives me bonkers because I'm
same.
like, this isn't it, guys. Like, and there's multiple accounts of people saying that it was a terrible thing that happened to them.
Yeah, so he wins this lottery. It was
Yes.
31 million, and
Yes.
within 2 years, a lot of stuff happens.
Yeah, he gave all of his money. He spent all of his money, gave it away, or donated it, and was left with nothing. I believe a divorce happened, and he ended up ending his own life.
Bankrupt, divorced, and then ends his own life all within 2 years.
Yeah, and so there's this thing that I learned about during that time of disorder, but was on my way to reorder very soon, and it's called hedonic adaptation. And it's this science that says basically the good things that you envision for your life will never quite be as good as you imagine them. However, the bad things you envision that could happen to you are never quite as bad as you imagine them, which is
Hmm.
kind of it's this gut check. Like if you were somebody who is longing for something, like a very, like you said, you have a lot of writers who listen to this podcast and they just want that book deal. Getting that book deal will be fantastic. And it will not be as fantastic as you imagine it to be.
Yes, yes, 100%. Yeah,
Yes.
there's like this great Jim Carrey quote that's like, "I wish for one day everybody could be famous and a multimillionaire just so you could see that it's not the answer to
Yeah.
everything you think it will
Yeah.
be."
It's not. It's
Yeah,
not the answer. And
yeah.
yet also the worst thing you can imagine happening to you. And there were accounts of even somebody who had lost a child who had been a part of this
Mm,
study are never quite as terrible as you imagine. And that's about the
mm,
worst thing I think most of us can imagine happening to us.
mm.
And so I think
But you
it's
go on living
you
somehow,
go
like, it's
on
that
living
feeling. Yeah,
somehow, right?
yeah,
And I think that what that shows us is I think it should be a comfort, really, because if you're going for that thing, for that moment, that like shiny golden moment, that golden moment might come, but it's not going to quite be there. And let me tell you, it fades fast.
that's right.
So remember, like, whatever it is that you are going after, go for it for the right reasons. Make sure it is
Yes,
not for fame. It's not to check that thing off your list that's going to make you feel worthy, because those feelings will pass quickly. But that instead it is something that is worthwhile. That it's worth your effort, that it's going to bring healing into the world somehow, some way, in a way that is that you can. So I don't know.
yeah.
I think
No, I
it's,
love that.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I just saw this interview not too long ago with Scotty Scheffler where he was
Yeah.
talking about, like,
Yeah, I
he
was gonna
wins
bring
the
that up.
Masters. Yeah.
Yes.
He wins the Masters or whatever, and then it's, like, 60 seconds of yay, and then it's, like, you're right back to being you
Yeah.
know, you're right back to your life, and so, like,
Yes.
you have to have the right things, the first things first,
Yeah. This is
because
a
that is
guy
so
for
fading.
people who don't pay attention to golf, and I don't really, but my dad watches it every Sunday when he comes over, and so I'm aware of who Scotty Scheffler is. And this is a guy that cannot lose right now. I mean, he is
Yeah.
winning after win after win after win. And he has publicly come out and said, like, this isn't it. Like, this is not the point of life.
Yeah.
And so I think that should hopefully guide us in the right direction of going after things that like actually matter. Because if you're doing
Mm.
it for your ego, if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you'll be disappointed pretty quickly.
That's right, that's right. So, coming back to your full circle to one of the first things you said, like arrival it doesn't really exist. It's an illusion. We never quite get there.
Yeah.
And the both and, right, of overwhelm and gratitude, of lament and joy, of awe and of what is,
Mhm.
and sort of glancing at the longing for what could be. And Carlos Whitaker, I heard him say in a talk once, glance at the world and gaze at God. And I think it's kind of
Mm.
like a similar thing playing out here of like glance at where you could go and where you're headed, but gaze at where you are,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
like you're gonna miss this. One of
Yes.
the things I talk about and underestimated is like assume it all works out. Assume you get everything you ever wanted.
Yeah.
How would you prepare now?
Yeah.
What would you do now to like, and for me, a big answer to that is actually enjoying the process. Because
Yes.
I watch these documentaries, Billy Joel, we just watched, Arnold Schwarzenegger, we've watched Sylvester Stallone. All of them get to where they want to go. They do everything they ever dream of, basically. And they're now like 70, 75 years old. And they would give anything to be back to be the 20, 30, 40, whatever version of them who's the underdog in the climb.
Yes.
So don't rush the
The
underdog in the
process.
climb.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so good, Mary. And when I look back at like, for me, like writing that first book and how hard that was to actually just write the book. And then on top of like the publishing stuff, like I failed my first time. My first proposal with an agent got turned down by all 10 publishers that she sent it to. I talk about this in this book because that night when I got that news that all 10 had said no, I wrote something on the internet that was not, I wouldn't call it viral, but it was shared widely. And I just knew, like, okay, God can make something new out of this too. And that little piece of writing that I published online that night, that ended up reshaping, it was part of the introduction of that book and ended up reshaping the
Wow.
book. And
Wow.
it's just like, it was just a testament that, God can enjoy the process. And really, when I got to that point of actually publishing that book, I will say this, because I had failed, because that process was so grueling, it actually did make that moment sweeter, and it deeper too. It wasn't just that gold shiny star moment. It was just like this deep, like, recognition of all I had been through, all that I had put in, and also all that God had done along the way, and just feeling such gratitude when it finally
Hmm.
happened.
Oof, that's good. That's so good. So last big question I have for you is talking about longing. You say, however, there were other longings I could have handled better. I wish I'd known a phrase I learned just before my first book was published, a phrase that has since helped me practice real gratitude because it helps me to be honest about my longings and reminds me that there is beauty in this phase I am in. That phrase is this: it's not my turn. It's not our turn for everything. It never is. It is our turn for some things. So, final parting words about how it might be the person listening's turn for some things, especially if that person keeps waiting on perfect to begin.
I think the phrase, "it's not my turn," allows me to realize what it is my turn for and to be grateful for those things, while also preparing to do the thing that I want it to be my turn for, right?
Right?
So,
Yes.
in
Preparing. We
yes,
really don't give preparation enough credit.
yes,
We really
yes,
don't.
exactly. Like that time that I was referencing then, I had 3 kids who were 5 and under. It was, and medical appointments, and like, if you've ever been to kids with to the pool with kids who are that age, like there's no sitting, there's no relaxing. And also, like, I was like trying to, I had been a TV journalist for a long time, and I knew that I could not be a stay-at-home mom. Like, it just wasn't in the cards for me and my personality. And I was trying to find that all out. And, like, it wasn't my turn to like go big on social media and like have a book contract like so many of my friends were doing. It was not my turn to enjoy the pool. It was not my turn to go on fancy date nights. And yet it was my turn to have these sweet little mushy babies who would never be quite as cute as they were then.
Mm.
It was my turn to like, we did these date night ins every Friday, and it was just this really special time with me and my husband and connection and growing up together, really. And it was my turn to prepare. And I did that. I showed up every day in some way, whatever way I could. And it didn't look the same every day. But I showed up in some way to get to where I wanted to go. And like I said, that the process, and failing so many times along the way, like, man, I look back at that fondly now. I have to say that. Like, was it all good? No, it was not all good.
Mm.
And it was really meaningful. And
Yeah.
I appreciate what I learned in those times of it not being my turn.
Yeah, that's so good. Oh, that's so good. All right. So, like I said, now we're like a few pages into chapter 2. So, just to give you an idea of how much goodness is in this book, you need to just get it. Read it fast, read it slow, read it both ways. Jillian, thank you so much for being here, for taking the time. I know we even went even longer than we thought we would, but look at us go. Tell them where they can find you, this book, any bonuses they need to know about. This will come out about a week before launch day.
Awesome. Yeah. So you can find me at jillianbenfield.com. You can find all of my books there, including my free ebooks there. You can find me at Facebook at Jillian Benfield and Instagram at Jillian Benfield blog. And there is going to be a freebie when you pre-order this book. So that is for your listeners, where you can get if you pre-order the book, and you can get it for 40% off plus free shipping when you order directly from the publisher, which is Baker Publishing. But
Nice.
no matter where you order it from, you can get a free audiobook to go with it. So you can listen to
Nice.
it in the car if
Mm.
you're like me and your life is like lived in the car right now, and then like go home and take notes in a hard copy.
Y'all, that is such a huge bonus. I am also in the same umbrella of publishers. I'm with Revell under Baker. And I just love that they do that for their
Yeah.
authors. This free audiobook, in addition to the book, you're gonna want, I'm telling you right now, you're gonna want one to underline. I'm telling you right now. Trust me on that. 6 pages of notes in. And then to be able to listen to it while you're walking or in the car, folding laundry, whatever the case is, like jump on that pre-order. They're a huge help to authors, especially authors. You want to get more of that kind of author out in the world where there is such depth to what they're writing. And so make sure you get that pre-order in. Go follow Jillian, get more of her in your life. All right, friends, the book is Overwhelmed and Grateful, The Key to Finding God's Goodness in All Life's Ups and Downs. It is out soon everywhere books are sold. Get those pre-orders in. Get this in your hands or the hands of a friend who really needs it. And for now, I want to leave you with these wise words from Jillian. There is no line dividing the secular and the sacred. God's fingerprints mark it all. Our job is to recognize it, to recognize this love who is ever present in us and in each other, in nature, and in the good things God inspired people to create. I want to create pause, to sit in awe, to thank God for life's beauty in busy times and times of heartbreak, and when I am finding my way to new ground. This is what I hope for you. This is what I hope for myself, that we are fully alive while we are living. Until next time, friends, this is the Mary Morant Show, and welcome to your underestimated season.